Hello, welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse. And before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British rail critics, and of course, my underwater train finders. You are the reason why this content remains right into the danger zone. And today, we are going to be discussing fighter jets, very specifically, but the best ones. Well, some of the best ones. I didn't feel comfortable making a solid top 5. These are the absolute, unquestionable, definitely 100% best fighter jets, because there's a lot of options for that kind of list, with so many variables to consider. So I just kind of put together a list of 5 ones that are, well, objectively, great, phenomenal, among the best, without question. These are 5 of the best fighter jets ever. And don't ask me if the Warthog is on here. The A-10 is not a fighter jet. It's a ground attack aircraft. What part of that don't you understand? The McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II. Now, how in the world could I make a list of top 5 best fighter jets ever if I didn't include the Phantom II? Do you realize that over 5,000 of these blasted things was produced? It first flew in 1958, and it's still in limited service in some militaries. During the Cold War, trying to produce a capable fighter jet was still an unknown science in a weird way. They were still trying to figure it out all over the world, and it wasn't clear exactly how best to do that. But the Phantom II set a lot of precedents for what future aircraft should be. It's a tandem, 2-seat, twin-engine, all-weather, long-range, supersonic jet interceptor and a fighter bomber. It was flexible, as it was found out. So it didn't just do dogfighting, though it did that. And it saw service for both the Navy and the Air Force in America. Despite the concept of the Phantom II being eloquently put as, if you strap a big enough engine to it, even a brick can fly, the Phantom II was a lot more maneuverable than people get the credit for, and it was also a lot more capable than that. For its time, it was excellent, able to tangle effectively with enemy MiGs over the course of multiple decades. In fact, both a US Air Force pilot and a US Navy pilot each became aces by achieving 5 aerial kills in this plane. Though admittedly its most famous role was probably its use by the Wild Weasels. It's a code name given to the US Air Force to an aircraft of any type equipped with anti-radiation missiles and tasked with the suppression of enemy air defenses. It's an incredibly dangerous job because, well, you basically have to fly into enemy SAMs to do it. But the F-4 proved incredible for that purpose. Besides America, it's been utilized by 11 other nations in their militaries. And even now, it's still in active service within the air forces of Iran, South Korea, Greece, and Turkey, though in some limited capacities, as, it's old. For a fighter jet, it's ancient. But you can't knock what the F-4 was able to achieve in its time. I think it'll always be looked back in history as being one of the greats. The Eurofighter Typhoon. This plane is an interesting one, as it's not the product of any one nation. Europe likes to do things, well, together lately. They argue still, but the countries over there tend to try to unify a lot of their efforts. And that was kind of the case with the Typhoon. It's a European multinational twin-engine Canard Delta Wing multi-role fighter. It was originally meant as an air superiority fighter, and is manufactured by a consortium of Airbus, BAE Systems, and Leonardo. The prime customer of this particular aircraft is the NATO Eurofighter and Tornado Management Agency, which represents the UK, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Development of the thing started towards the tail end of the Cold War in 1983, but arguments over the whole thing's purpose slowed down production, and France, who was initially part of it, decided to leave development altogether and make their own plane, the Dassault Rafale, which, to be fair, is a great plane in its own right. But the other countries still trucked on to create the Typhoon anyway. The first prototype first flew on the 27th of March 1994, though, to be fair, a technology demonstrator did fly as early as 1986. And the project was almost halted multiple times because they started wondering if they actually needed this plane. See, with the end of the Cold War, people just thought, oh no, there won't be any need for a fighter plane for defense or anything, because what could possibly happen? It's not like bad people exist. No. Anyway, they totally still made it. Its delta wing and forward canards definitely give it a distinct design, and this is actually a setup that's really favored by European planes in recent years. The Rafale does a similar thing, as does the Swedish Gripen. But the Eurofighter in particular is highly agile, meant to be really good at dogfighting, and it is. Modifications through the future give it abilities to attack ground targets, and be compatible with an increasing number of different armaments and equipment. It first flew in combat in the 2011 military intervention in Libya, with the UK's Royal Air Force and the Italian Air Force. It hasn't had much of a chance to shine in an air-to-air conflict just yet, but it's believed it would be very capable at it should the need arise. It's still in use today, serving in air defense duties for the majority of the customer nations. Right now, it still serves with the RAF, the German Air Force, the Italian Air Force, and the Spanish Air and Space Force. Other smaller countries like Belgium, Denmark, Singapore, South Korea, as well as others, have looked into getting them on their own as well. The Sukhoi Su-27, or Su-27. I've always said Su, but some people say it's supposed to be SU, but Su just comes out for me, like MiG, like no one says MiG, whatever. The Su-27 I put here not because it's necessarily the best in its own family, it was just the first, and it spawned so many other types of aircraft based directly on it, it's kind of hard to argue its dominance. It was meant to be a direct competitor to large US 4th generation fighters. After all, this is a Russian plane. Its maneuverability was insane for its time, and it was meant to be an air superiority plane. Certainly capable of that on its own, it was also meant to be complemented by the MiG-29, which is a great plane itself. It first entered service with the Soviet Air Force in 1985. Was long-range air defense against American SAC Rockwell B-1B Lancers, as well as B-52s. To date, 680 have been built, and they are still in service, despite it first flying 45 years ago. But like I said, a big part of why the Su-27 is so good is that it was adaptable and readily available for modification. Types improving on it, such as the Su-30, the Su-33, the Su-34, 35, and 37, all bear an obvious resemblance to the original Su-27, yet every single one has made slight tweaks and alterations, making the design even better, or at least better suited for specific roles. For example, the Su-34 is meant to be a ground attack plane. China has also taken advantage of this incredible design, created both the J-11 and the J-16, and they're generally also considered included in the Flanker family. The Flanker, by the way, is the NATO reporting name for the Su-27. The McDonnell Douglas F-15E Strike Eagle. No, not the Eagle, the Strike Eagle. The F-15E was an improvement to the original F-15 Eagle, and the Strike Eagle is an all-weather multi-role strike fighter. It first flew 36 years ago, the 11th of December, 1986. And it's still in service now with the United States Air Force, Royal Saudi Air Force, Israeli Air Force, and the South Korean Air Force. This particular modification of the F-15 was meant for long-range, high-speed interdiction without relying on escort or electronic warfare aircraft. And it's good. Like, really, really good. The F-15 as a whole is probably one of the best jets ever produced for the fighter role. In fact, it's so good and famous that, frankly, whenever you ask a kid to draw a fighter jet, they usually draw something that looks like this. Like, this thing is the typical, that is a fighter jet plane. And boy, howdy, is it good at its job. It's participated in multiple conflicts all over the world, including Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, the Balkans, Southern Watch, Northern Watch, all the way back to the Gulf War. The Israelis in particular have gotten quite a bit of use out of them, and here's the real kicker about the F-15E. In fact, the F-15 as a whole, I should really be saying. The Strike Eagle may be the best version of it, but doesn't mean the Eagle itself should be ignored either, because, so the Eagle family, about that, it has a perfect combat record. Perfect. Like, it's been in combat, for one, many times, but it's never been shot down, not once. and scored at least 104 air-to-air kills, without ever being shot down itself, not one time. That's insane! So if anyone ever questions the dominance and ability of the F-15, give them that. Just let them know about the record. Like, I think that's really important. To me. The Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor. Now, I might be just a little bit biased, I admit this, because this is my favorite jet ever. I love this thing. Look at it. Look at it. It's just so cool. And good. Genuinely so. Developed as a part of the United States Air Force's Advanced Tactical Fighter program, the aircraft was meant to be an air superiority fighter, with stealth capabilities and long-range targeting, which basically allows it to never necessarily really need to dogfight. It can literally shoot down enemy planes without them ever knowing it's there. That is cold as ice, and I love it! Not that it can't dogfight, its inclusion of thrust vectoring, which is literally what it sounds like. It can angle its own thrusters to do all kinds of crazy maneuvers. All this combined made it the first ever Generation 5 jet to be put into service. And to date, it's considered one of the best ones, at least in terms of its potential capabilities, but the truth is, it really hasn't gotten much of a chance to shine at all. It's only ever been really deployed in a battle situation a handful of times, not nearly as often as the F-15, for example, which has done a lot more heavy lifting. In fact, most of what the F-22 wound up doing the one main time it was deployed was in Syria, and that was dropping a lot of bombs, which it can do. It does have some ground attack capability, but that really isn't what it was meant for. And I think the main issue, well, it's twofold. For one thing, only 195 of these was actually ever built, and they probably don't plan on making any more because they are expensive. That was the whole reason why the F-35 was built, to be a cheaper alternative, which is hilarious considering how much that program wound up costing. Its hefty price point and relatively few numbers compared to other jets means that they're less likely to want to put them out there. In fact, there was at least one situation where they refused to deploy it to the Middle East because they just didn't want to lose them. Also, there's very limited reason to deploy this thing. In many circumstances, and if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, a lot of the wars that America has fought over the last few years haven't really been against forces that are, at least on the technical side, even footing. Most of the militaries that America has to go up against are still using a lot of equipment from the Cold War. In fact, a lot of them don't even have their own air forces at all, or ones that are minuscule at best. The F-22 is designed to take on some things that, frankly, our opponents lately just don't have. It's not like we've been going toe-to-toe with any of the European nations, or the other superpowers, or anyone like that. I mean, if our opponents were using planes like the aerial boss fight Su-27, I could see the F-22 being needed for that nonsense, but they aren't. In fact, Russia doesn't even want to use the Su-27s. They have like 7 of them tops. Like, no one seems to actually want to use their Gen 5 fighters, because scary, I don't know. I guess the F-35 is getting more use, but still, it just seems weird that these awesome technical achievements when it comes to aerial potential aren't really being used to any of that potential. Like, what's the point of having it? But I guess at the same time, it's kinda good that a weapon of this caliber is never really needed in its full form. The fact that we haven't had to use the F-22 and tap into its innate potential means that things aren't nearly as bad as the media makes them out to be. I mean, there are still problems, don't get me wrong, but they could be worse. We could actually need to use this thing. We don't. And maybe that's for the best. The Air Force has actually talked about possibly retiring them, feeling like they aren't really needed, though the government has pushed back on that, wanting them to at least finish their next project, the Next Generation Air Dominance NGAD manned fighter program, which is meant to replace the Raptors. They'd rather keep the Raptors around for now and not get rid of them before there's a suitable replacement, which does make some sense. And to be fair, the NGAD is meant to be a Generation 6 plane, so I can understand it taking away the Raptor's position in our military forces. It's gonna be a sad day to see it go. When I was younger, I wanted to grow up and fly these things, and I just, never committed to that. But I can still play Ace Combat. That's a thing I can do. And with that, a special thank you to all my underwater train finders. Thomas Ward, Somedude267, Orange Glass, Royal Hudson 2860, Lord Hawk 444, Benjamin Owens, Pincher Kitsu 131-232, Mr. Black Rose, Master of None, Josh Johnson, No for Life Guy, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, DM Tribal Typhoon, Tommy Rossini, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Joshua Long, Alaric Jaspers, Brian Pretzer, Jack Carson's Railroad Videos, Major Klutz, Hayden DeGrow, and Ohio Trucker 1. Till next time, this is Darkness, and a bid you all a fond farewell.